An ally is a very courageous folk who goes beyond their way to accompany Indigenous movement in right relationship and in healing. An accomplice will take their privilege and their rights and get into uncomfortable situations to continue to advocate for the healing and movement for Indigenous people through right relationship and a way of reconciliation.
Yeah, I'm so stoked how this is all holding up. It's really nice.
It's amazing. Like, it's looking so good.
It looks so good for that climate. Yeah, we can tighten this up a little bit, but it's all
Put some more
really
weight
good.
down on this end so it falls back a little bit faster.
Yeah.
I'm Patrick Lucas, and I am the founder of the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program. I grew up as an Air Force brat. My family, we moved all over the place constantly. Every couple of years we were moving to a new place, new community, and every time we arrived somewhere new, first thing I would do is jump on my bike and head out. That's how I found my way through the world. It's how I made friends. It's how I made community. It's how I found a sense of place and belonging. But it wasn't until in 2008, I moved to Vancouver and the Lower Mainland. I bought my first mountain bike since I was a kid and started riding the North Shore. And I started a new job as a community planner with First Nations around BC. And it was a really difficult job. It was a really difficult experience because I was the outsider. I was this kind of white kid hired by the government to go into these remote First Nation communities. And I didn't, although I had some education, I really didn't know that much about the issues. I didn't know much about their lived experiences and what they were really facing. I was just this young white guy trying to figure it all out. And for years I did that. And I'd go into these really remote communities. I'd be there sometimes just for a couple of days at a time, and I'd be gone again. And it wasn't working out very well.
So what we want to do is sketch out what needs to happen for then. So it'd be like moving the dirt piles to where Doug's talking about and smoothing that out.
And so I was invited to work with a small Nlaka'pamux community of interior Salish people called the Boothroyd Indian Band. That's how they refer to themselves. And I was in a meeting with the elders and the leaders, and I was listening to them speak about their youth, facing challenges with sedentary lifestyles, drugs and alcohol, law enforcement, and they were really concerned about helping them find a better way. And it was in the middle of that meeting that an elder asked me, "What do you know about mountain biking?" And he said, "Our kids are doing it. They're riding all over the community. We can't leave a pile of dirt without these kids building some stupid looking jump out of it. We want them to stay outdoors. We want them to stay active. We want to build them a bike park. Can you help us?" And of course, I said yes. And so I reached out to people in the mountain bike community, and we returned to the community and we worked with the youth. We asked them, what did they want? Of course, they said jumps. And we built them a small bike park, a little learning square and a pump track where they could test their courage and their skill. And the community opened up to me in ways that they never had before. They started confiding in me where they wanted to go as a community, and I knew I was on to something special. So I formed the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program. And the whole idea was that I was going to use it as a vehicle to connect with communities, to find a way to move forward, and it blew up into something much bigger and more meaningful and more impactful than I could have ever imagined. So for the next couple of years, I spent traveling all over British Columbia, meeting with every First Nation I could that would grant me an audience, and explain to them this vision I had for creating this mountain bike Shangri-La where people would come together and ride. And for the most part, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. You know, they would politely listen and then show me the door, and I really couldn't understand why. And one day, I walked into a community in the interior called the Hatsul First Nation, and I did my presentation, and at the end of it, I met someone who would make a huge difference in my life and the direction of the program by the name of Thomas Schoen.
My name is Thomas Schoen. I was born in 1965 in this community that we're in, Murnau am Staffelsee in Upper Bavaria, Germany. Growing up in Murnau to me always meant comfort to a certain degree, and that comfort was provided by the scenery, just by how beautiful this place is, but also by its artistic value. I feel it inspired something within me. It inspired creativity, artistry, and that really formed me into who I am. In my early to mid-20s, I decided I need to get out of Germany. It just got too tight, too crowded, and to me, North America was a no-brainer. I traveled in the United States. I traveled lots in Western Canada. I loved the country. I loved the people, and I thought this is gonna be my new home. On top of that, I had an interest in the North American Indigenous culture, so I thought maybe there's something to pursue in that direction. And I left Germany and went straight to BC's interior. Living here in the interior of BC, I had so many outdoor recreational opportunities. I was heavily into paragliding. I was into canoeing. I started getting into kayaking and backcountry skiing. But over the years, I've always been thinking about mountain biking. I really didn't want to take on another sport, another hobby. But Williams Lake is such a mountain bike community, is such a hub in the interior for mountain biking that living here, you almost can't avoid getting into mountain biking. All your peers are on a mountain bike 5 times a week, and that really made me wanna start taking up yet another hobby. In 2014, I met I met Patrick Lucas. It was at a community meeting at the Hatsulk First Nations. So I was invited to a community meeting and Patrick was there to do a presentation at a community engagement session. I was really, really intrigued by what Patrick had to say. I thought he had a vision that I wanted to support and I wanted to buy in. So I convinced him to come out for a coffee with me after the meeting. We drove to Williams Lake from the small village and we sat down for a coffee. He told me a little bit more about his ideas. We went into in-depth and I think it turned into a pretty late night for the two of us. But it really sparked something in me. We kept in touch after that meeting, and over the next few weeks, we quickly established a joint vision for what the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program could really become.
So I met Patrick in 2014. He was interested in understanding where there might be a convergence between what the mountain biking community was doing in the province and what he was discovering in his engagement with Indigenous communities around the province, where he discovered that there was quite a bit of interest when the topic turned to mountain biking and trails.
After listening to Patrick's presentation at Hatsulk, it instantly clicked that combining mountain biking, getting Indigenous youth into mountain biking and combining this with trail building workshops, with bike skill clinics, and emphasizing the opportunities that outdoor recreation can bring to these small communities. I was hooked. I realized he's got something really big there and I want to be part of this.
Thomas started working with First Nations, and he worked with the Hatsul First Nation, and he built the Hatsul Heritage Village, this award-winning tourism village. And the reason he was so important to me is because he really understood how to work with First Nations, how to engage with them, and really how to listen to them. So we would go to all these different First Nation communities, and I would always be so over-eager. I'd want to see the trail happen. I'd want to see the project happen. I'd want to be out digging right away. And he was always teaching me to be patient. We have to listen. We have to listen, we have to sit and listen to what they're telling us, and the project will come in time. And it was after months of listening to them that they started to invite us back, and we started digging. So the program was running, we were starting to experience some successes building trails and community, but we still felt something was missing. We really wanted to find the community we could work with where we could fully develop that vision for mountain biking and trails. But I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to make a connection with the community where they would trust us enough to bring us in and to fully realize that vision. And that's when we learned about Tom Eustache and the Simp First Nation.
I'm Tom Eustache. I live in Chutra here in Simp First Nation. I've worked and lived here all my life. And I work with Patrick in the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike program. Our Simp people were, as you came in, I don't know if you would have got a look at the sign, but it says people of the river. And we're the people of the North Thompson. The North Thompson goes all the way up this valley, and it goes just about all the way up to the headwaters of Fraser, which our territory is there. And so we're the people of the valley, of the river here. We went to Sun Peaks, and we're up there just to go to Sun Peaks and go hiking and whatever else was up there. And yeah, there's people up there riding mountain bikes, and just that looked really cool, and it would just look like a lot of fun. And I always wanted to get back into riding since I was a little kid. I can remember riding a bike when I was a little kid, and it was something I enjoyed. So, and we went for a ride, and yeah, that was the end of that. Yeah, got to do this now. It was when you got on a bike, you sort of forget about everything else that's going on around you. Like there's nothing else but what you're doing. Because if you're thinking of anything else while you're riding a mountain bike, you're gonna crash. So you're concentrating on what you're doing, you're having fun too. And the adrenaline of it, it's just crazy. So, you know, doing that for the first time and feeling that was just amazing. And it's an escape sort of from your normal everyday life of what you're doing, because you don't think about nothing else. Yeah, I think when I first had contact with Patrick, it was through email, I believe, from somebody. I can't remember who it was. Somebody give him my email address. He emailed me. It's probably because it was about mountain biking that I did respond back to you. And so, yeah, I responded back, and we made a plan to meet, and yeah, we met, and he's all gung-ho about getting out there, and we should go do this and that. And I said, no, we should go for a ride. We should just go for a ride. That's all I want to do is go for a ride. We don't need you to sit down and talk about all this other stuff. We'll do that maybe on the ride or when we come back, but we got to go for a ride first. I think Patrick and Thomas gave my trust because they came out and they actually come here and built trails, and they kept coming back. They were some of the few people that came to the community and actually followed through with the stuff that they said they were going to do.
Pat has been working with the Simp First Nations for about 1.5 years, 2 years, up until the point that I met Tom. We hosted a trail building workshop, and during that week-long workshop, I camped at the trail network, at the high point up on the mountains. There was an old little lean-to shelter, and I set up camp there. And I really think that sparked something. That got Tom going. He was almost impressed that I lived on his land, that I set up a camp, and I stayed there in this mosquito-infested little hole, and that really opened up the doors. The community took me in, they brought me food, they brought me water up to my shelter, and during the day we worked with the new trail builders in the community. It was a fantastic experience, and I absolutely fell in love with the community.
I think once we gained Tom's trust, things just absolutely exploded. We spent hours out on the land together, walking, exploring, and laying out new trails, and digging together, getting down in the dirt. And we started working with other communities. Communities started reaching out to us from all over the province. It really felt like we'd finally figure out how we could do this in the right way. And the program really took off.
The relationship that me and Patrick and Thomas has, yeah, it's usually planning and how we can go forward and making communities better. That's what I sort of seen as we started working together, me and Patrick, is that, he was really interested in doing something. And I had to show him what we needed to get done, and versus his ideas of what he wanted to do. He wanted to, come in and do all this stuff and save the community, and it's no, we're just gonna do it this way. This is the way it's gonna work. For him, it was, let's do the stuff for your community. Let's not even think about tourism. Let's just build something that your community can use. And then if tourism comes out of it later, well, so be it. And the Every Child Matters thing, stuff like that. Just, those are things as I was growing up I knew nothing about. I knew nothing about that stuff because I was away from this community, the main community here, until I turned, I think, 22 or something like that. I came and worked back in the community here. And I started working in construction, and we were doing renovations, so I got to work in everyone's home. So I got to meet everybody and all the families and everything. So that sort of reconnected me to our community and got me thinking about who I was, because all of a sudden, okay, you're First Nations. And to that point, I didn't know what that meant or who we were actually. Maybe that was a big part of it, is I didn't know who some people were. It's taken up till a couple of years ago to even know and be proud of who I am, of all of the stuff that we do here. And I can sit and talk to you about the really cool things that we do in our territory and our people do.
I think for Thomas and I, watching the struggle that Tom was going through to figure out who he was and what it meant to be an Indigenous man, we realized we needed to look at our own lives and understand what brought us to this point. And for both of us, it was about going back to Germany.
Growing up, I struggled with what my grandparents did during the Second World War. And a lot of my generation had the same struggle. We didn't know, were our grandparents just sympathizers, or were they murderers, to be frank. That left so many questions open. We loved our family, but we also criticized them for what they have done. Could they have acted differently? That was a struggle throughout my youth.
In 1982, my family was stationed in Lahr. My father was an officer in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and we were posted here as part of the NATO forces that had been occupying Western Germany and Western Europe since the end of the Second World War. And when we arrived here, I was quite young, I was 7 years old, and we had this story in our mind and that we were told, or that we kind of made up, about why we were here. My father served in the Air Force. My grandfather fought in the Second World War and liberated, was part of the liberation of the Netherlands and Germany from the Nazi regime. So we had this story that we told about ourselves, that we were here as liberators, as saviors. We were here to help people. And my brother and I, we rode our bikes all over this city like we owned the place. You know, in our view, the people here were grateful for us being here because we had saved them from the Nazis, and now this was the height of the Cold War. We were holding the line against Russian aggression.
In the 1980s, I became politically involved. It was the height of the Cold War. The Berlin Wall was still up, and the peace movement started. We wanted to get the American, the Canadian occupiers out of Germany. We started demonstrating in big cities. The Easter marches started. Hundreds of thousands of people being bussed around all over Germany to go to demonstrations, to hold hands, to create these long linked human chains in protest. And I was a big part of that movement, and that really, really formed me during those years.
So this was the early 80s, 1982, 1985. It was the height of the peace movement. The United States military wanted to install these missiles, the Pershing II, in Western Europe, and that initiated the peace movement. People all across Western Europe, and particularly in Germany, came out against this, and they saw it as a provocation, as a way of escalating the arms race between Russia and the West, and they wanted to stop it. And for us in LAR, it was the first time where we saw people starting to protest against the Canadian military and against our presence there. And there'd be protests against the Canadian military, and for the first time, we started to realize that our presence was a way of making people feel unsafe. And it had a huge impact on us. And it was the first time where it took me years to understand it, but I felt like an occupier, an unwelcome guest on someone else's lands.
The books by Karl May about the noble North American Indian inspired me and my whole generation so much because they represented freedom, they represented equality, they represented adventure, they represented justice. But they brought this to us in a package that was foreign and that sparked this sense of adventure within us.
In 1985, my family moved back to Canada from Germany, and that sense of being an occupier on someone else's land and someone else's community stayed with me and had a huge impact on me for the rest of my life. And my family continued to move around Canada, and I was always searching for a sense of place and belonging. And at the same time, in the late 80s and early 90s, Indigenous issues and First Nations were exploding in the media all across Canada.
I think these trails had a huge impact on children, and not only kids that ride mountain bikes, but the school has an outdoor classroom that they bring the kids up to, and they get to run up the hill. When you'll be able to hear them from here running up the hill and hauling and screaming, and they get to be outside. So that's a huge impact for them to be able to come up into this.
grew up in foster home, so basically didn't know anybody, really didn't know any of my family very much. So when I did move back here in 1995, I stayed with my brother for a year and kind of on and off Kamloops couch surfing, Kamloops streets, Kamloops this and that, just because I ran away from my foster home when I was 16. So Tom, many, many years ago, he helped develop who I am, and in large part just because he was like a brother or a cousin I didn't know about, but he brought me in when I was in trouble before with the band, and decided that, you know, this is, if you really want to stay here, then you really have to behave in the way that you need to behave. And it took a lot of, I guess, learning skills and remembering that alcohol wasn't a good way to go. So he gave me the idea of working on that trail. That was just as a laborer. Again, just cleaning trees. Basically working alone a lot, but it was nice. It really reinvented the person that I was turning into, and developing not only my mental but my spiritual game as well, where it's, you know, I related a lot of what I did to what Mother Earth is, and how and why she provides what she does, and how we use it today in mountain biking. So a lot of what I've done in the past is basically build me.
But yeah, that's the connection to the land, and that's what I love about it. It's, yeah, when I go up there, if I'm just cutting trees on the trail or whatever, it's awesome. You know, it's no better place for me to be. And I hope other people can feel that connection when they get up there, and that's what I want to spread around to other people. When I see people walking down the trail, I think, man, I hope they had that same feeling that I did.
How the mountain bike industry can help influence Indigenous and First Nations communities positively is getting youth and community members back on the land. If it's through mountain biking or trail building, youth and community members are starting to remember where they're coming from and the stories of the land, and also learning the land that you're on. If you're living in residence anywhere in the world, I'm certain that there were First Peoples, and by learning the history of the land, you start to unfold the remembering within the First Peoples of that community. You are a part of the healing.
I feel trail building is an amazing tool when it comes to reconciliation. It really shows how we can grow working side by side. We're working in the dirt, we're working in nature, we're talking about the past, we're talking about the pain, about the hurt, and there is no better way to form a close bond with someone that you want to support by working shoulder to shoulder with this person.
You allowed us in, and you helped us to take a small role, like a small but really important role in building the foundation upon which your people are manifesting their healing journey. You know, they're out here on the trails, they're using these trails to speak the language, they're using the trails to teach their kids, they're harvesting medicine and traditional materials, and they're riding and they're walking and they're getting healthy. Yeah. You know, and the community's doing tons of stuff to make all of that possible. And by just really letting go of all that ego and that savior mindset, we were able to play like a really small role.
it didn't feel good to be Indigenous. So you're sort of, I was ashamed of it. And I never thought of that until we started doing a lot of stuff. I started doing a lot of stuff in my community, and a lot of that stuff, it just, sort of opened my eyes up, like, I should be proud of who I am and where I'm from. And then later on realizing that if I'm not proud of who I am and where I'm from, I'm never going to be healthy.
The most important thing I've learned through all of this is that it really does come down to relations. Every time we step out on the land, we go to build a trail, we go to ride, or we try to build partnerships, we have to ask ourselves, what is the state of our relations with ourselves, the land, the people around us? And if we take care of those things, we take care of each other, that's how we move forward in a good way. That's how we become allies. That's how we become accomplices. We become relations.